What's going on, everybody? Brezzy43 here. I'm back with our next video. Today's video is going to be really short. We're going to be looking at some teams. There was somebody released the data from the Battle Frontier Top Cut, which was a tournament that happened this past weekend or the weekend before. I forget which. I think it was just this past weekend. Yeah, today's Wednesday, so yeah. And there's a ton of data to look at, which is really cool. A lot of what we expected, some things we didn't. I've been focusing a lot on Series 10. I'm going to start doing some playing here too, I think, trying to get into some tours and tournaments. But if you all want to see some Series 9 content as well, I can still do that. I've still got a few teams that I've been using that are reasonable and fun. I did place back into Master Ball, but I don't think I'm very high. We were in top 150, top 100 at the end of Series 9, or at the end of last month, excuse me. So now, I mean, we could try doing some climbing again too if we're interested in that. But I'm really interested in Series 10 as a whole, so that's what we're going to be looking at again today here. So we're going to jump into these teams. We've got uh, we've got a bunch of teams here from the Battle Frontier Top Cut, and if you right away you're going to look and you're going to notice the big three that I mentioned right away. We've got a lot of Zacian, we've got a lot of Xerneas, and a lot of Kyogre. Additionally, three Groudon teams made their way in with one Yveltal, one Palkia, one Ho-Oh, and one Lunala. Marco Fierro was using, or Marco Silva, excuse me, was using Lunala Stakataga, which is really interesting. These four Pokemon right here had won 2019 Worlds with Primal Groudon and Mega Mence, I think. So this is a really powerful core that I think Lunala actually got a huge buff with the removal of Dynamax it because of Shadow Shield you can EV for your super effective hits, and it might be worth looking at over Calyrex. That's another thing to note too. There's no Calyrex in the top cut. Calyrex Shadow was just not in the top cut. It isn't to say necessarily that it's a bad Pokemon, but it looks like people have just figured out answers for it, or it's not really like highly competitive um, in high level Pokemon right now. Um, so some people might look at this and they might get frustrated and say, "Oh my God, it's just always the same Pokemon. Why is it always the same Pokemon that are on these teams?" But I look at this and I think about how exploitable this is. Um, you get to see a lot of people are going to be looking at these teams and building off of them to sculpt their teams. A lot of Zacian teams are going to follow the same formula. You know, Zacian, I think Rillaboom, Incin, Regieleki, and Urshifu plus insert your restricted Pokemon, insert another like support Pokemon, and you've got a team, right? That's a very exploitable team. So, for example, against primarily the Xerneas teams, but also to some extent some of these Zacian teams. Um, I think Neolego matches up phenomenally. If you look at this team right here, the only answer to Kunal's team, the only answer that Kunal has to a well placed Neolego is Urshifu. If you can protect against the fake outs and you have an answer to Urshifu, um, Neolego could just rip through this team, right? Because Regieleki can't hit it for very hard because Neolego's got phenomenal special bulk. Additionally, Xerneas and Volcarona don't want to face up into it. Incin doesn't really want to either. And Rillaboom takes the poison attacks well if it's Assault Vest and can pressure it with a grass move. But again, if you've got a way to punish priority, or you've got Fake Out plus Intimidate of your own, then Neolego could just romp through teams, right? That was something I noticed, and Nihilego also matches up pretty well into some of these Asian teams as well. Um, it doesn't do that well into Zacian itself, but it does match up pretty reasonably well into the Rillaboom Incineroar, the Regieleki, like we talked about, kind of Landorus as well, because you are faster than it, so you can either chip it down with another Pokemon and then get the finishing blow with Neolego. You can set up a substitute with Neolego before Landorus attacks. So really interesting here. And it's definitely something to consider. Otherwise, there's a lot of exploitation to be done here, and a lot that's been using among these big three. I think that with Kyogre, we're going to see a ton of Serena, as we saw here on the winning team had Serena. It did have Shedinja as well, so be on the lookout for that. Shedinja might make a comeback. Um, but Serena is really good on these Kyogre teams because Kyogre is so punished by both Rillaboom and by just fake out cycling. So I mean, all the restricted Pokemon are as well, but Kyogre having weakness to Rillaboom primarily is something that is a little frightening for it, and Serena protects it from that really nicely with Krinly Majesty. Um, Additionally, some other fun things to note here. Latias made its place onto two of these station teams. I think the reason why is against these Tornogre teams, Latias resists the water attack and has phenomenal special bulk. Let's pull up Latias quick. We talked about Lati in my last video. Yeah, 130 special defense is very, very good. So you can EV this thing to take Groudon, or to take, excuse me, to take Kyogre's attacks really, really well, including the ice attacks because you're so bulky and you can get off an Icy Wind, or you can set Tailwind of your own, or you can do whatever. So Latias was an interesting pick, and Zacian struggles versus these Tornogre teams, right? Like Zacian, especially without, none of these teams have Tailwind, they only have Regieleki, which in order to beat Kyogre, I think you need to have Focus Sash Regieleki because Kyogre can EV to be faster than Regieleki with a Tailwind. So you need to be able to survive the water spout, and then immediately get off an Electro Web, right? That's going to be the only real way that you're going to be able to deal with Kyogre. But Lottie does a very similar thing. Lottie plus Regieleki into that team would be really interesting because you could slow him down with two different. You could set Tailwind, or you could go for Icy Wind. You can go for Electro Web if you're Sash. So I think Latias is really interesting, and we'll have to see how it shakes out. Obviously, it doesn't match up very well into Xerneas, and it also doesn't really match up that well into Zacian. But against Kyogre, it seems like a pretty reasonable pick, and as well as against Groudon, just being able to resist the fire attacks and levitate over the ground ones. Also, I wanted to note that a couple of interesting things. I think Ditto might be a reasonable pick here. Both Marco and Art Carver using a Ditto. I have to assume it's a Choice Scarf variant, and it's really interesting, right? If you get to switch in to copy something like a Zacian that has Intrepid Sword boosts or even Swords Dance boosts, and have a Choice Scarf, you're gonna be faster, guaranteed. Also, this is nice tech against Xerneas, right? You can, if Xerneas is boosted up across the field from you, you can switch Ditto in, copy Xerneas, and get off Moonblasts or Dazzling Gleams or faster than the Xerneas can, which is super cool. So don't sleep on Ditto. I think Ditto is really solid. Couple of cool Tailwind Pokemon. I have to assume that these two are also Grassy Seed to get the Unburden trigger, like we talked about in my last video, being able to get fast Tailwind. And I think Volcarona plus Groudon is really interesting as well. I really like that. Otherwise, I think this is going to be a really good place for me to start team building. If you're a counter team builder, or if you like to counter the metagame, which can sometimes be fun to do, this would be a really nice place to start. You could take a look at these teams and decide for yourself what you want to go with. Thinking about your matchups and thinking about um, having sort of a scalpel for things. Like I said, one of my teams I'm going to be building is probably going to be Neolego. At least have a Neolego on it. I really like that Pokemon, and I think it's a phenomenal Pokemon into Zern, as well as dealing with a lot of their matchups. Just getting the Zacian matchup to where you want it is going to be interesting. So I think that's most of what I wanted to say about this. There's nothing else really notable here. I have to assume Prankster Thundurus, Sheer Force Life Orb here. I have been seeing Rocky Helmet Landorus Therian, which is kind of interesting. So this Intimidate Landorus form having access to Rocky Helmet's pretty cool. Interesting to see Entei here. And then double Wide Guard potentially too. Both Araquanid and Hitmontop both learn Wide Guard, so could be double Wide Guard. Is there anything else worth noting? I kind of like this Ho-Oh team. This Ho-Oh team is kind of cool. It's got Gastrodon to protect Ho-Oh from both of, or two of Ho, actually all three of Ho-Oh's common weaknesses, right? You redirect the water attacks, you take the rock attacks because you resist it, and you're immune to electric. So Gastrodon is a really cool partner to Ho-Oh. It's just kind of difficult to make it work in a metagame full of Rillaboom. You don't really take the Grassy Glide well, even with a Rindo Berry. That it's kind of rough. So I would definitely be conscientious of that if Gastrodon's a Pokemon you want to use. Um, the other thing I did actually notice was the absence of Amoonguss for the most part, right? There's one here and then there's one here. Otherwise, I don't see any Amoonguss. Additionally, this team has two grass types, which I think is really interesting. I've seen that a little bit, and they must not be coming to the same matchups. And they kind of do different things too. Amoonguss is kind of a poison type some amount of the time too. Really interesting double grass, but Amoonguss is way down in usage, which could be due to just other better grass types. It could be due to things that are pressuring it. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. It has a bit of a weird spot in the metagame, but I do like it on this Palkia team a bit more than I like it on Sergio's team. I wonder what Sergio's purpose for Amoonguss was here. But there's a potential Trick Room here on this Palkia, so having Trick Room with these two supports is really cool. And then lastly, there was a Talonflame. I have to imagine that this Talonflame could be running Quick Guard, which would be kind of cool. It's a way to fight the Intimidates coming out from, or not Intimidates, excuse me, the Fake Outs and priority moves coming out from everything, um, as well as filling in another resistance or another ground immunity. So yeah, I hope you all like this. This is just something that I was thinking about and looking at today. Um, the the event, like I said, I believe was this last weekend. So I'm definitely going to be starting here when I build my teams, thinking about my matchups, thinking about what I like and what I don't like about these teams, um, and then trying to construct something cool that has some really powerful elements to it, but also might be a little bit counter metagame. Um, yeah, so cool. I hope you all like this. I'll definitely just take a screenshot of this. I don't really have a link I can share. Um, it was sent to me in Twitter, and I don't have my Twitter on this computer, so I had to take a snip of it. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. So thank you all for watching. Short video today, but I hope you got a lot of information out of this, and I hope your Series 10 adventures are going really well. So I'll catch you on the next video.